How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the Music Production Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Funk. I make music as AfroDJMac. And today I'm here with Vince Cimo and Vir, his musical collaborator, who I've just met too. What's up, guys?
Hey, Brian.
Hey, man, how's it going?
It's going good. And I'm psyched to have two of you here. Vince, we met at Ableton Loop, and probably if you're following the Ableton Live world, you've probably seen his new creation, DataLooper, which is a hardware pedal that's designed to help you do some live looping in Ableton Live. So we met at Loop, got a chance to talk, and now I'm kind of beaming into a jam session that you guys are in the middle of. So I appreciate the time that you guys are taking. I know how hard it is to get jam sessions going. So thanks for having me.
Hey, I think both of us make our own schedule, so we're happy to do this with you and, share our creation with your world as well. So it's a good thing. And I actually just met Vir recently. I saw his band perform a couple years ago at Joshua Tree Music Festival. And he's one of the rare people that posted his phone number on Facebook. And in the process of spreading DataLooper out to the world, I gave him a call and was like, hey, I saw your band perform, and this might be something that you might use as well. And then, we've just gotten to talking. We have really similar interests and stuff. So it's like, cool, let's meet up and hang out and jam and stuff. So here we are.
Awesome. The way music brings people together, right?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, it's interesting when you go down, when you get into Ableton, there's so many wormholes that you can go down. And we've seen that with so many different people. And I went down a particular wormhole because I wanted to combine live looping with a live band situation and combining electronic music as well. And Vince just happened to see me and was like, wow, this is really similar to what I'm doing. And turns out there's another mutual friend of ours who's doing some really similar things as well. So it's like similar wormholes, you find your wormhole friends.
Yeah. There's all these people around you all of a sudden.
Yeah.
That's
cool.
It's
a good thing.
Are you guys both guitarists? Or...
Yeah. I guess for me, like, I studied classical piano when I was growing up, and then I didn't how cool, I guess, and picked up the guitar and then focused on that for a while, and now I kind of play drums and keyboard and piano and then a bunch of folk instruments and stuff. And Vir's similar multi-instrumentalist.
Yeah,
as well.
I play a little bit. I started on drums, and I probably am strongest on guitar, but I played bass for years in a band. But I got also into a bunch of eclectic world instruments that I love combining. And then I got really into electronic music, making beats and stuff like that too, and synthesizers. So just kind of, multi-instrumentalist meets, electronics meets looping.
Yeah. Oh, that's pretty cool. Yeah, I started on guitar. That's what I played for many years, and then started getting into other instruments a little bit. I was the one whose house we would have band practice at, so there'd usually be a drum kit there, and sometimes the bass would be around, so I was always able to kind of fiddle a bit. And then, getting into electronic stuff and using Ableton Live and MIDI controllers. Now it's like I almost just see everything as just another tool. And
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I could definitely see that with you. I mean, you got like half of your instruments are just like Snapple can, and like I mean, you can really, you can make music out. And people are searching for things that are non-traditional now. Like even like all the top 40 stuff. I mean, there's very few like pianos, guitars, like traditional instruments. People want their ear to have sparkles.
Yeah, I heard something recently. I think it might have been on like All Songs Considered by NPR, but they were talking about how like the top 40 music used to always be like guitar based music, and now there's like almost no guitar in top 40 music, and there's certainly no guitar solo. Like that used to be the staple of a song, is verse, chorus, guitar solo.
Yeah, it's really it's so rare that you hear a guitar. I think a lot of it is that it's almost like an instrument reaches its time, it's like there's not too much you can do with a guitar anymore that hasn't been done. it's hard, you know. I mean, Jimi Hendrix kind of trumped the whole guitar thing, and we're still trying to catch up. And I think as a musician myself, I love guitar, but I'm always searching for new sounds, fresh sounds. And I think that probably most people are like that too. You know, we're kind of in the age of the bass right now, right?
Yeah, it's very true.
How low can we go?
Yeah, low frequencies, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Like, both of us are as much as we can in the festival world, and I know my experience, you know, is people. I think a lot of the reason people are going to these stages is because they've just got a really great sounding bass response, and you know, so much of the DJ music is just like really cool, interesting bass, like cool drum pattern, and then like some weird sounds on top, but it's really just about the bass and the drums. And you know, I think that's cool. You know, like you can feel it. You know, especially when you're at a festival situation where they got some like function ones or something, and the earth is just like resonating with this deep thing. And it's a good feeling.
Yeah, it is funny. I heard this recently from I can't remember where I'm hearing things anymore, but that music is like, or hearing really is a form of the sense of touch, like because the sound waves are vibrating like the little hairs in your ears and moving them, just as if like you know, you're getting touched, I guess, and that's what you're feeling and interpreting as sound. So to feel like that there is something like, you know, um, about loud music and just the way it like changes the way your body feels and goes right through you, and you kind of can't really get that with just, you know, listening to something quiet. It's just not the same.
Yeah,
I
I remember I read an interview with some. I think it was either the engineers or producers from like one of those major English studios during the '70s, and they were saying that a lot of the sound of those like Cream and kind of like classic English rock bands were them coming in with crazy loud guitar amps and bass amps and like drummers that were just smashing, and the engineers trying to figure out a way to like get clean recordings, and like their like just sheer volume level of playing affected so much because the room acoustics were just like really involved in the sound at that point, and just like everything, you know, it really changes the way everything feels, and it, you know, it comes across even on a recording.
Mm. Yeah, it's true. Like it just changes the way the microphones respond and
Yeah.
everything. And now we finally have like the sound systems that can really do that and give us those feelings.
Yeah. Yeah, I know just in the past like 10 years, I remember the first PA I had was like a Rocktron. And I think like the paradigm I was locked in was like, well, you're never really going to be able to hear the vocals, but you know, because they're always going to feedback. There's never any headroom. And then now I've just got this like 4,000 watt QSC system. It's like, yeah, that's not, you know, now I'm worrying about like the perfect compression on the snare, you know, and it's like, yeah, the tools are amazing.
Yeah, true, right? Yeah, my first PA was just, I don't even know why we had it. We're probably better off just yelling louder into the air.
Yep, times have changed.
For sure. So you guys were kind of playing a little bit. What were you doing? What was the situation, the setup like?
I have a whole. We're in my studio right now in Venice and West LA, and I have a whole setup, Ableton setup, and a looping setup, and I have bunch of MIDI controllers, and we were just jamming live where we're syncing up. He was playing some drums, and I was playing all the rest of the toys, synth bass and guitars and things like that. But he came over primarily to look at my setup, my wormhole, and see if he can, you know, see if we can make things a little bit better. We have a, you know, mutual interest in sort of this live looping in a, you know, for me it's like an expanded situation. I play in a band called House of Hamza, which is actually a 4-piece band, and we are doing all improvisational live looping. It's kind of like an electronic jam band. And you're seeing that around with some bands. I've seen a few bands like that touring around. You know, a lot of times you see two guys or just 3 guys with a ton of gear, and they're jamming. There's a big sort of electronic jam band scene in Colorado right now.
Yes, I've seen that through the the travels over the internet.
Yeah.
Nice. So everyone's kind of doing their own looping and putting it all together.
Yeah, exactly. There's so many creative ways to do it. Now we have Link and everything, and you can put computers together, and it's a kind of a really exciting world to all these different MIDI controllers and different plugins and everything. And I think there's a lot of new sounds coming out right now. I mean, there's a lot of kids in their garage that are just breaking ground. I'm sure it's a pretty exciting cutting edge place to be. I like playing a lot of ethnic instruments, or sort of traditional, sort of I guess you call them like shamanic instruments. I play a lot of like ethnic trance instruments. So I like incorporating those instruments into electronics and into live looping.
I'll show you a couple of these things.
Like this one here that's a Moroccan gimbri.
Ooh, cool.
Right? So I put a pickup on it and plug it into the computer and loop it.
Oh, that's a beautiful looking instrument. It sounds great too.
Yeah, there's other instruments like this one is this is a Turkish jimbush. Same thing. It's like I put a pickup on it, plug it into the computer.
Nice.
Different sounds, right? New sounds.
Yeah. I mean, they're stringed instruments, but almost, I've never seen that instrument before, but it almost looks like it's like a cooking pot with like a skin over it, and it's got this like really cool metallic. Yeah.
This is actually, interestingly enough, this is a Turkish jimbush, and it kind of looks like a banjo, and but you're right, it kind of looks like a cooking pot, or like what do we call it? We call it an electric bedpan. Looks like a bedpan or something, right? But interestingly enough, see how long the neck is here. It has a super long. It's so jimbo turkey, or let's call it a yali tambor. But typically this had an Arabic tuning, or had like 17 or sometimes 21 frets. But I cut all the frets off to just make it 12 notes. Interestingly enough, I've seen some kids playing around, and I have a guitar that has a 16 fretted guitar, and that's one interesting way to get new sounds. I'm starting to see people playing these Arabic electric guitars, and you have quarter tones in there, and so there's something fresh, right? It's like, wow, what is that? I never heard that before.
Yeah, there's that whole I don't know if you've heard of Desert Dwellers, but that they've got kind of this Arabic vibe about them, and there's a whole scene around people like playing oud and having like trance beats and doing Arabic rhythms and stuff like that. Like there's a subgenre that is really popular with
it's kind of like a world it's like electronic world music. Or I love trap music, so I've been calling it ethnic trap.
Yeah. That's cool, because those are notes we just don't even have, and are more like Western scales, which changes all the intervals, all the harmonies up really nicely. I can imagine it's almost for me, it's almost like too much new ground to explore. You know what I mean?
I think for most people, most of the West, it's too weird sounding when you hear those weird Arabic instruments. But I've noticed, because our ears are so used to 12-note scales as a musician, and I've noticed other musicians like, okay, well, what else is out there? What if I added in this one quarter tone note? Whoa, that's kind of cool. And I've seen some kids, like getting interested in that kind of thing. Like I said, I've seen video footage of like electric guitars that have been modified, where the kids took out frets from the top of their Fender Strat, pulled out from the top of the neck, and put them in lower towards the nut, and put them in there to make quarter tones on their electric guitars. And then they put those things through phasers and fuzz tones, and distortion, and suddenly it's like, whoa, this is like maybe a heavy metal guitar player's dream to have this other, you know, little couple extra notes in there, and it's fresh and it's different and it's new. And I think that's really key with music is making fresh sounds.
There's also, I mean, in outside of the electronic music world too, there's so many cool collaborations that are happening. There's a really interesting album done by Zakir Hussain, who's a phenomenal tabla player, and Bela Fleck, where they've got like banjo and tabla, and then these like orchestral string things that are happening, and it's like interesting blending of Western and Eastern music. And then there's another one that comes to mind is if you've never heard the Goat Rodeo Sessions, it's one of my favorite albums ever. It's got Stuart Duncan, who's a like Nashville session violinist, Yo-Yo Ma on cello, and then Chris Thiele on mandolin, and it's like just, and then an upright bass player, I can't remember that guy's name, but it's like phenomenal. This like classical music meets bluegrass, and again, it's like, you know, you'd never had this genre bending that you until now. Really, it's awesome.
Yeah, we're really seeing that. It's like for the first time in history, we have access to so many different instruments, both modern and traditional. And just like Vince said, is we're seeing these combinations of things you'd never seen before, like didgeridoos with, you know, the Moroccan gimbri that I just showed you, or some, you know, strange instrument with over a hip. You're like, wow, this is cool. There's this whole fresh world out there.
Yeah, I recently had some. I had a Mexican Japanese fusion. Speaking of blending, it was really good. No,
Nice.
Completely off topic, but yeah,
Well, that was food, right? Yeah. Okay.
that's food. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think it's probably gonna happen if you think about just the way the whole world is sort of shrinking and everyone's more in touch, and it's so easy to just see what other people from different cultures are doing. It's probably a matter of time. I mean, I know, like, for me, like when Ableton came out with Push, and they have some of these like more exotic scales. These are like notes and intervals that I've never experimented with before. And give me 1 second. I'm just gonna shut my dog out for a second. All right.
Yeah, no worries.
Make a little edit here because she's worked up. We'll be right back.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, thanks for being part of this.
Yeah, man.
It's like, oh yeah, it's gonna be a podcast right now.
Okay, she always likes to participate in the conversation.
Oh, I mean, yeah, it's cool. Yeah.
But also, the Novation Base Station 2 just came out with a firmware update that has all these micro tunings in it.
Oh, cool.
And
Interesting.
it is interesting because like now, and what's kind of fun too is like the keys that you think are going to be, that should be F sharp and this is D. Now it's something else that we don't really even have a name for. At least, you know, I don't have a name for. Maybe I'm sure people do, but yeah, it's just this weird note, and it kind of makes me think back to like you know, like in blues music, we get the blue note kind of between the minor and major third, where that's a really soulful kind of like in between, you know, feeling kind of like that's really become common in so much music, I think, just because we've been exposed to it so much.
Yeah, you know, and a lot of like I've gotten really into like a lot of traditional trance music, like I said, and a lot of those instruments that you see around the world don't have frets. And what I hear in rural areas and like in the country is usually a pentatonic scale, either a major or sort of minor or something else, like the neutral pentatonic scale, which is like a 1, 2, 4, 5 minor 7. But what you're seeing is that because those instruments don't have frets, it's like it's kind of the minor third, it's kind of the third, it's kind of, you know, I really listened to it. It's like, well, it's more of a vibe, you know. When trance music is played over and over and over and over again, and so somebody playing an instrument like that, they're just feeling it, and it's like it may be kind of a minor third, or it's kind of in between the third and the minor third, as I've noticed. And our ears tend to place it in that because we're so used to it. But I really think there's a whole nother exciting world that, well, Arabic, you know, people that are into Arabic music and even Indian music has many more microtones. Their ears are very, very accustomed to it. It's a whole nother world. I mean, we think we have issues with like a, you know, just doing the major scale and try doing like whatever scale that is on like 21 notes, right? What is that?
It's gotta be a feel thing at that point. I mean, I was in India actually about a year and a half ago, and I took some. I met like a sitar guru, and I took some lessons with his son or nephew or something. Who was the guy was like 16, but he was a tabla player. And after taking like 3 tabla lessons, I was like, you know, I'm never gonna play tabla. Really, I just want to listen to you play tabla.
Yeah.
It's just, I mean, you're in that culture. You're born into that caste essentially, and then you're going to be a musician. You know, like you're trained on it from day one, and that's all you're really focusing on. And I mean, the level of understanding of the instrument, and like, you know, for the sitar players, the microtonal, the feel that they get, even if there's not a deep technical understanding of that, it's just a beautiful thing. You know, it's a cultural thing.
Yeah. And then here we have, you know, like you listen to the top 40 and it's mostly hip hop and trap. And I love hip hop and trap. But what you see, how you see it evolving is really interesting. It's like we all love like that 808 kick sound. I love that kick sound. And we all love like big subby basses or 808 basses, right? But when you really look at hip hop, like usually it's those 2 things. It's the 808 bass and it's the kick and the drums. And then there's some kind of crazy synth loop, some kind of melodic synth loop going, and maybe a pad or something. And that's it, right? There's not much more than that. Think of like Migos, like walk it like I talk it, right? They're doing that triplet thing, which is cool. That's fresh, right? But really in that song, there's this repetitive synth loop that's playing over and over again. And I see with hip hop, it's like they push those sounds. It's like what other sounds can we get that are playing behind us? And one of the first songs I ever remember, that song "Teach Me How to Dougie."
Yeah,
there's a doom back in there, right? And it's like, whoa, what's that? Yeah. But that's a doom back, a Middle Eastern drum is playing the beat. But that's it, just one little. I mean, hip hop is so stripped down like that, where there's just the drums and the bass and one cool looped synth usually. But I feel like my interest is that taking that drums and the bass and one cool looped ethnic instrument, you know, like I said, ethnic hip hop or ethnic trap. And you hear that in a lot of, you know, hip hop's kind of become the language of like the developing world, and the way that reggae was, you know, it was like you could go anywhere wearing a Bob Marley t-shirt. You could go anywhere in the world and like, you know, kids would come up to you and be like, yeah, Bob. And now it's hip hop. So there's all these kids all over into the world like playing hip hop, but still have their traditional instruments and their sensibilities and applying that to you know, their music. And we're seeing so much cool music when you really listen to like a lot of the other hip hop and world music that's going on in like other countries. It's really cool. There's some cool stuff happening.
Definitely a lot.
Like that girl Jane. Have you seen that girl Jane? She had that big hit Merhaba.
So.
She's real cool. She's a French girl, and she was in South Africa, and it's like this great dance crossover hit where they used a little trash can guitar called the ramkey from South Africa. It's this little like tin can with strings on it, and it makes the track. It's like a full dance track, and it went, you know, hit the Billboard charts. But you know, it's like, wow, this is what we're gonna see more of, is this sort of, you know, other influences creeping in.
I find that really fascinating, and I think, as you're saying too, like the loop part of it, kind of just embedding it in your brain over and over again, you kind of get used to anything that loops, whether it's even in our tonal scales or not. Once you start hearing it over and over again, you just accept it and become used to it. And I think like what you're saying about some of the like more minimalistness of like hip hop is that it allows that stuff to sort of exist and do its thing. Whereas if you start, throwing in too much, then there's clashes. There's, it gets masked behind other stuff as well.
Yeah, I think having a clear focal point is really important. I mean, no matter what the genre of music is, having your, like, usually music is driven by some kind of vocal or some kind of lead line, or I mean that across the board, even in classical music, you got some main melody that's playing, and having that bed of instruments kind of gives the ability that, especially if it's simple and there's not too much like clashing for whatever that lead thing that's presenting itself. And in hip hop obviously it's the vocal. It's really, it has a clarity to it. You're understanding the statement.
So true. I know when I first got a computer with unlimited tracks, I'm thinking like, oh, I'm going to add all these parts. It's going to be awesome. You're going to hear all this stuff swirling around. And after a certain point, all these separate elements just start becoming one thing. And it's almost like people. I see this in my classrooms as a school teacher. There's like a number where once you get past it, it stops being like Bob and Mary and Jamie and whoever's in the room, and it just becomes a crowd, a single thing. And I think the same thing happens with sound, where you hear the separate elements up until a point, and then it's just one thing. So having that focal element.
Yeah, totally. And that we all look for that. I think that's what really makes musicians. We look for that moment where we're all one, right? We're one with our instruments, and we're one with the crowd, and we're all going on this voyage together. There's no past, there's no future. It's really a cool feeling. It's those magic moments that we all look for with music.
They are magic, and the second you kind of notice it, it tends to go away.
It's a great feeling for everyone, though. When it does happen, it's just like, I mean, just even the jam we were doing, there was like these moments where it just locks in. It's like, yeah, that's the feeling. That's that lock, and it's like a second level of communication that happens, and it's beautiful. I think that's why as musicians, that's why we do it. And I think it's why audience members come for a show or listen to music, to feel connected, really at the root,
Yeah, and it's funny too when you think about like electronic music, especially if it's something that's like the same every time. It's the same track, it's the same backing track or whatever. It's amazing how different it sounds depending on what's going on between the performer and the audience. And it's something like I didn't notice as much playing acoustic music or like, like I want to say real instruments. I don't think of it that way, but
there's a smug that comes with that.
Yeah, and I definitely don't mean it that way. If I did, then I'm a huge hypocrite. But
yeah, Mr. Snapple can.
Yeah, so like you kind of can blame the difference in how the music feels on your performance or on the sound or on this or that, but it's still very different when it's the same track being played, the same backing music or the same loops or whatever it is. It's funny how much the atmosphere of the building, the people, the person you're playing with, it all changes it. And it almost seems like it shouldn't, it's like one of these like science experiments that should be the same every time, but it's not. There's like other factors at play, the energy.
I mean, yeah, I think probably all of us have experienced playing the same set of music in a room full of 5 people and then a room full of 500 people. And it's like, even if it sounds more or less the same, it's a completely different experience for everyone involved, and yeah, it's cool. It's nice to know that that's a thing. I think
that's the magic of it. That's the fascination, that's why it's like so exciting and thrilling when it happens.
Yeah,
you can't just call it up every time. Like there's more to it. There's something like else. And I'm not sure I really want to ever find out what that thing is, to be honest, because I think the thrill of finding it is so exciting. And if I just knew how to do it every time, it'd be like, okay.
Yeah, it's magic when it happens.
Yeah.
I think, just going back to kind of, I guess, why we initially started this discussion. Both of us are loop artists, and I mean, you make electronic music that involves looping it as well. And while there's something awesome about like having the repetitive trance, I know in my experience when I've gone and seen a lot of loop artists, there are a lot of people who have one direction they can go and just keep on layering and layering, and then crash down and then do the whole thing over again.
Yeah.
And for me, I think that my impetus with making the DataLooper and just making the music that I'm making in general, and I think Vir as well, is to use looping as a tool, but have a system that you've built that is dynamic enough that you can like strip things down, pull, cut things out, change things on the fly, manipulate the things that are already there, and like have enough development and like human control over this mechanized thing that it sounds alive, and I think like, in traditional trance music, like we were talking about earlier, even if there's someone on a sitar playing the same repetitive line or playing a drone instrument, their attack is slightly different every time. And I think that giving people a tool in the modern music landscape where it's computer doing the looping to change things and like have a more dynamic performance is kind of what is happening now. That's been my like mantra and goal with this tool that I've made as well.
Yeah, something I think about a lot with looping is doing things that makes it different every time. And that might be like a round robin sampling, where if I'm playing one note over and over again, it's triggering a different sample.
Yeah.
Or even doing loop lengths that loop at different times. Like this loop is 5 bars and this one's 3 and this one's 8, and they never sort of interact the same way, or at least it takes a really long time for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like creating a really a human feel where the music is breathing more. I feel like we're going to see that more. God, it reminds me of I was at Burning Man a couple of years ago, and this guy came up to me out of the blue and said, "You're a musician, right?" I was like, yeah. And he goes, "Listen," he goes, "the universe isn't built on 12 notes. There's not 12 notes out there." He's like, "There's millions of notes." He goes, "The notes in between the notes are the best anyways." And he goes, "Keep that in mind." He goes, "There's no 12 notes." And he goes, "Rhythm." He goes, "Rhythms aren't straight." He goes, "It needs to be elastic. Pull it, stretch it, slow it down, speed it up, throw it back and forth." He's like, "The universe is static like that." And then he walked away. And I was like, oh my God.
That's a Burning Man experience.
Wow, that's awesome. But I thought about it, it's like, yeah, creating elasticity in electronic music, turning the tempo knob and all of a sudden slowing everything way down or speeding it up. And I'm starting to hear tracks like that. I've been hearing that where it's like, I can imagine being on the dance floor, a big electronic dance music party, instead of like, you have a big fat breakdown, but you also have like a part that like
slows a little bit.
Whoa, slows way down and then comes back real quick. And I think we're going to hear and see more of that elasticity. And also, like we were saying before, with what notes you got besides those 12 notes?
Yeah, I mean, like, and hip hop is really leading the charge in that. Like, I remember like Cypress Hill's hits all feature a tea kettle, and it's like, there's like, who knows what that warble is, or and it's great. It's a great thing. Yeah, it's cool to see it all, kind of all the tools, all the ideas at our disposal.
We do that in the band that I play with. I sync everything up with our drummer, and he has a MIDI controller that's linked to the tap tempo as well as the tempo control. So in the middle of the song, once all the clips are going, all the loops are going, he'll actually slow down the tempo. We've been experimenting with this and speed everything back up, or drop at halftime. Just he turns the knob. So it's we're working on it.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's alive that way, and for me, this is a good example of like the perfection of the computer. It was something I've always longed for, to have those perfectly in time things. And then as soon as I got it, I was like, well, it doesn't feel right now anymore. And being able to do that can actually be pretty cool. And when I play live performances, I've got like my session view. This is where I do most of my work, and I've got like different scenes that change the BPM. Sometimes I'll do the BPM change with something a little more ambient and loose, so you don't really feel it. But once in a while, I'll just turn the tempo knob while the beat is going slow and build the energy a little. And there have been times even when I've done it really by mistake, where I just didn't change the songs properly, and this track is way too fast or way too slow. And I've been like almost embarrassed, turning like the tempo down. But I've had people say like, "Yo, when you did that, that was awesome." It just felt like, whoa. It's definitely something to be explored, especially
Yeah,
as like probably you guys feel the same way as like maybe like a rock musician, as I always was. Like, tracks are always in different BPMs. There was never like rock music is at 140 or something like that. But a lot of genres of electronic music are like set at this particular BPM. And it seems
Yeah,
to me, I was always like, what? Like, how is that so? Because
yeah.
um,
Like Psytrance. Psytrance is 138. That's like
yeah.
that's like the golden number for Psytrance, right?
yeah,
138.
Well, I mean, I think traditionally that functioned because you had, you didn't have as many DJ tools as you do, Tractor Auto beat matches everything. But like,
sure.
if you're a house DJ and you just had your two decks
Hmm.
and you got your house collection, and there happens to be a track that's like PM, like, yeah,
Right.
but when you're blending and everything's within a 5 BPM range, you got your, you can very easily manipulate things
Yes.
into smooth transitions. At least that's what I've had explained to me, is like, that's why these electronic genres are locked. But nowadays, I mean, yeah, we have, like, the computers are doing most of that work anyway. So,
Well, it's
you kind
interesting
of go.
to think about what conventions we have that maybe like the technology informs, or the particular instrument informs that, and how can we get past that now that we don't necessarily need to be confined to those sorts of things?
I've got an interesting another historical example. So
Nice.
if you listen to like early Beatles recordings, you'll hear, a lot of like left, center, pan. That
Right.
the early consoles only had 3 positions, so you could only do hard left, hard right, or center.
Mm.
And the stereo mix was oftentimes just an afterthought. Like, everything was mixed in mono. And then they would just do these stereo mixes that were like, we'll just do those just to have them. But so, you get all these old recordings, and I mean, that's obviously changed like crazy over the years. You got all kinds of width plugins and stuff. You can pan anywhere. But that's another example of kind of technology changing, and it changing our whole musical atmosphere as well.
Yeah, those Beatles recordings are weird sometimes when you put on headphones and the drums are over here and all the
Yeah.
vocals are here. Or if
Yeah.
you are listening on a system where one of the speakers isn't working, you're like, what the hell's going on with this track? Where are the
Yeah.
vocals? There's no drums? What? It kind of messes with you.
I remember reading something by Paul McCartney that he said that a lot of when the Beatles were doing their early recordings, they were just coming out with like compressors and like reverb units and things like that. And he said it was very new to them, but he said the key that they were interested in was with the technology, and he said he would apply this to today's technology, is what sounds can we get out of it that we never heard before? How can we push this thing till it's about to break and get some cool sound out of it? Like an amplifier wasn't really meant to be like overdriven until, Link Ray or somebody like sliced a hole in the cone and then suddenly got a different tone. We can apply that same kind of concept to all these new MIDI controllers. It's hard to do with MIDI because like overblown MIDI sounds like crap, but I think it's still that urge with technology of what new cool sounds can we get out of this toy that maybe wasn't even built to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. And that's definitely where so much innovation came from. The trick is knowing where to look and experimenting and just stumbling across it and finding it. I
Yeah.
think you're right. I think there's a lot to be found and discovered. And sometimes, I guess, once we start doing something one way, we tend to just, that becomes the standard, and we just accept it. Oh, that's how you're supposed to use this particular device. This is what that sound is for.
Yeah.
But yeah,
It's,
it's fun to think about that. Like, wow, like what else is there? You know, what's right under our nose that we're just not seeing?
Right. Yeah. What if I MIDI this to this and put this USB to this and link this, and like, you know, there's kids right now in garages coming up with new sounds, just doing that, like making boxes that, you know, weren't supposed to do what weren't supposed to do that, but somehow some kid right now is figuring out some crazy new thing.
Right, connecting things the wrong way and having accidents and fun things go on.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're at a pretty interesting time. I mean, I'm really curious, you know, like what does it look like 50, 100 years from now? Like we have so many tools at our disposal. What else can we do? And I mean, we've had a couple of ideas. Like we were talking with another friend yesterday who was like, you know, has anyone invented a box yet that will auto in real time scan the tempo of the live band playing and keep everything on time, but let it to where it doesn't matter what you're doing, the box will always just be there. And it's like, yeah, I guess there is still room for growth, you know, because that kind of thing does not exist yet. Or, you know, I'm sure there's all kinds of things that we're going to see in the next 20 years as processor technology gets faster. And, you know, it's like, yeah, just anything you want, really.
You ever see any of those videos that came back out a few years ago where they would take like much older people and they'd put headphones on them and play them like dubstep and like all the dubstep that sounds like a factory tearing metal apart, you know? And they're hearing it and it doesn't even like register to them as music. It's just so alien to them. I wonder if in the future, like if you shot us, you know, 50 years in the future, we would like almost like not even know that we're listening to music.
Yeah. And that's where that classic thing is, where like, you know, I see like I was hanging out with my aunt and like somebody came up next to us and he had his, you know, his car was cranked and the bass was like, boom, you know, she's like, God, I can't stand that kind of music, you know? And it was like, it reminded me of like, wait a second. Didn't your mom say this to you when you were listening to rock and roll? Yeah. Oh my God, what is that garbage? You know, so it's like, it's really important to stay open, I think, especially as artists, to stay open to what's fresh, even though at first we might be like, oh my God, what the hell is that shit? I can't stand it. You know, like, be careful of that. Yeah. You know, allow yourself to, because one person's garbage is another person's gold mine.
I do have to say though, you know, being somewhat critical, one trend in music that I've really I just don't understand is just the lyrical content of a lot of like, I guess hip hop, but just a lot of like pop music in general. I mean, so much of it is just so blatantly degrading of women, so blatantly just ignorant and just like egotistical and stuff. And that's where I can say like, man, I really love the sound design. And I really love the boundaries that are being pushed here. But like, isn't there a better message that we can all kind of glom onto?
How many times you gotta say pussy in a song or whatever it is? So it's like, but I mean,
sound design though, like, yeah, there's some great producers that are working on that stuff. So I don't know. I have weird feelings about that kind of thing.
I hear you on that, especially as a high school teacher, and like, I'm always interested in what the kids are listening to, and sometimes I check into it. And I'm just like, oh man, I'm like sad that that's being pumped into their brains, and a lot of like consumerism stuff, like where, and then you see the kids echo it back like it's all about the money, and it's just like, oh man, like I wish they were saying all you need is love. You know, I hear you on that. I don't think it's everything, but I think it's, you know, it's an easy thing to like, you know, it's an image thing. It looks cool, you know. It's an easy thing when you're young to gravitate towards, maybe.
I mean, sex, drugs, and money, right?
It's still sex, drugs, and, you know, well, it's not rock and roll anymore.
Ego and money.
Sex, drugs, and EDM. Sex, drugs, and hip hop. It's still,
back in my day, we were just talking about love.
Get off my lawn, you kids.
Yeah.
Crazy newfangled music.
Rap, hi-hat. Yeah.
I'm gonna step out. I'll be right back.
Cool, yeah. Yeah,
So
so
let me ask you, in this jam session, I think you have to say yes, even if it's not true. Are you guys using DataLooper?
you know, I have just like walked in and went straight to the drum set, so that was our next step.
Okay.
Vir is using a soft step, and he's got his own kind of way he's oriented Ableton, and there were a lot of, like, he showed me his whole setup, and there are a lot of things that DataLooper can make a lot easier. Like, for example, the way he's got his tracks, he's using clips, and he's using clips instead of the looper device because he likes to have the tempo flexibility, and looper can only repitch when you change the tempo.
Yes.
So he's mapped a couple of controls on his Keith McMillan 12-step to start new clips, but he's limited to being able to do just a single guitar loop, a single bass loop, and if he messes it up, he has to delete all the loops at once. There's no way to kind of go back, and then there's no way to overdub, and there's no way to kind of save. Once he's got a loop or whatever, there's no way to save the thing he's done. So, like, very easily, the DataLooper pedal can make the solution a lot more ergonomic and, like, give him more control. So pretty immediately, we can set up his session to where he's still using clips, but he doesn't have to do any mapping. The pedal will automatically find clips that are not being used and allow him to keep on making them. He can do overdubs using a combination of a looper track and a clip track, where the clip track will take the output from the looper. Then anytime he does an overdub, it'll track that as well as what was previously being looped. So it's just like, it offers a number of options that weren't previously available. So that's kind of the next. Yeah, that was that. We're about to do that, and then jumped on this podcast call. So that's kind of the next thing we're gonna do in here.
That's probably a cool idea too, to just check out what's happening now and figure out how it can be integrated and streamlined using DataLooper or whatever.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, everyone, you know, in the process of making this thing and getting it out in the world, I've been trying to really directly contact a lot of artists and just get a very, like, thorough understanding of exactly what they're doing. Because my goal is to have this thing get shipped out to people, and then they'll have the option of doing the things that they were doing, but all these other expanded possibilities, rather than like, oh, I have to completely relearn a new system, you know. So I'm trying to integrate, oh, this is how you work. I could, like, make it so the DataLooper can also do that, and then all you have to do is plug it in, and then that's that, you know. So it's nice to be able to kind of get a thorough understanding of everyone else's setup, and then kind of use that as a proving ground for, like, okay, can this still integrate and work in your context as well?
Yeah, and that's definitely something I feel, and I know a lot of people feel like they've got their setup a certain way, and it's scary to do anything different to it. But,
yeah, especially with Ableton, because it takes a ton of time. I mean, you know, and there's so many, like, you know, some, like, the people who are really in it are a lot of them are using CliffX to do certain things. There's some people who are using Bohms, MIDI translator to, like, you know, send all these multiple messages at once, or translate things from the same controller. And I mean, I think that, like, my goal is just to make it simple and easy to use. And I mean, like, it's just like the Apple philosophy, where you've got this thing that's just like, it's a complex machine. Like, there's a lot going on under the hood, but when you open it up, it's just like, oh, it's a beautiful, like, simple thing, and it just works. And, you know, that's kind of like, I don't know, been my mantra with this whole product development thing.
right. Well, congratulations. It should be noted that you have reached a goal in
Yeah.
your production, so that's really exciting. And maybe I can ask you, we're like 40 minutes or whatever into this, I'm finally asking you if you can just sort of explain to people exactly what DataLooper is, and what problems you're trying to solve by coming up with it.
Yeah, so in my own personal musical journey, I made the switch over to using Ableton to do a lot of performance things. And I found that as a live musician, my hands were occupied. I wanted to, play the guitar or play the keyboard or whatever. And with looping specifically, I needed to be able to hit a thing and just have it go. So I was using an FCB 1010, a Behringer, big old foot pedal. That thing's not ideal for a number of reasons. One, it requires mains power. Two, the buttons are all plastic. Three, there's the layout of it doesn't make sense really for what I wanted to do. Then I switched over to a Keith McMillan soft step. And again, I really don't like the way the buttons feel. I could never really tell when they were being pressed. I never had any visual feedback with like, a traditional looper. I have an RC 50 or whatever. And I could just see, okay, it's red. It means it's started recording the loop, or it's green. It's like playing back, and I just never had that. And I decided like, okay, I should probably just build something. I mean, I worked as a programmer for Samsung for years. So it's like, I know how to make all this stuff. I should probably just build something better. And then I got really into the Ableton Live API, because you can write these complicated scripts that just plug in as a MIDI device, basically. So what DataLooper is in the end is a product that is just a USB powered loop pedal that allows you to use either the Ableton Looper or the whole session view system, and use clips or loops to kind of enhance your live performance. And then just like a hardware looper, you can control multiple loops at once. So the DataLooper has 3 sets of 3 tracks. There's 3 banks of 3. So you can have all the loops stop at once, all the loops clear at once, mute all the loops at once. When you bank between things, you can switch your sound banks if you're using clips. It's just you can recalculate the tempo. You can do a tap tempo. It just gives you this whole like footwork flow for doing live looping that is really designed around that, and it's really specific to making an ergonomic kind of feel for that type of performance. And then it's also really configurable. If you want to have one of the rows of buttons do something that's totally your own, you can just set it up however you want if you want to, but it also just work when you plug it in.
I think it's cool that you've got the option of using the looper if you want, which is the device inside of Live, but also the clip workflow too is pretty cool that you've got.
Yeah, I mean,
the option there.
The thing, so the sample pack or the loop pack that I made for you was really fun to do, because as I was doing it, I was like, okay, how can I make, like, what is the easiest way to where I don't have to look at the computer? And I would just like make a loop or two and then go back and be like, it would be nice if all the loops latched on to the same scene, and then I could press a button and jump to the new scene and then just go again. Right. And like I found all these little like workflow enhancements that because of that pack, I would just go back and code it and then try again and be like, okay, now oh yeah, this really feels good now. And, I got it to where I just had basically 9 of your instruments, and then I could just switch between the 9 instruments by switching banks. And it was just super easy to lay down like, okay, I made a sweet groove. I'm going to expand on this groove and record a couple loops underneath it, or I'm going to stop this groove and just do something totally new. And I could even like tap the tempo and stuff, and it just made it like I don't have to deal with the screen at all. And at the end of the day, I've got this like really organized sample pack, this loop pack or whatever. So for you can do that live, but for in studio is just awesome, because I hate going and MIDI mapping the first clip and then going back to my thing, and then like, oh, I messed up, I gotta go back to the computer and delete the thing. And like now I can just do it all, just focus on the music, use my pedal, like, and it works and it shows the colors right, and I don't like, and it's great. Just it's an easy way to make stuff, So yeah,
it's super cool. And that is something that we'll be putting up for download for everybody out there. We'll have that in the show notes. And just check out. It's cool to see the workflow, and also the music community is really cool too. So
yeah, it's some interesting. There were a couple of those where people were just walking by, because I have a studio that's in this like complex where there's a number of different warehouses where there's like a film studio, and then like ton of people who are creative in that space. So there were people just walking by or just wandering in, and They'd be like, hey, you wanna make a loop here, and just like go jump on the keyboard. So there are a couple that are like that don't sound like the rest of them, and they're probably those are the ones that are from some other people.
That's fun. I have to listen with that in mind.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah,
Cool.
cool. Yeah.
So what are you thinking next now? So this is gonna go into production. Where do you take
Well,
it from here? 'Cause, like, this, I guess, now presents a new problem, a good problem to have. But
I mean, I'm stoked, honestly,
yeah.
because now I've got about 40 to 50 people who are for sure getting this thing,
Mhm.
and so where now my focus is shifting. You know, I've met my goal, and it would be really great to have that keep going and make maybe a couple $1,000 more than the Indiegogo campaign. But what I want to start, what I've kind of begun to start focusing on is just like, okay, how can I make every detail about this thing absolutely perfect, so all of the people who get it in the mail are just like so stoked.
Right.
And it's fun. Like I've been going back and forth with some of the backers who have been like, hey, can you make it do this thing, and like, you know, then just talking to them and understanding their workflow and trying to integrate their feedback. So the next, I've got if you look at the Indiegogo at datalooperpedal.com, there's a kind of production timeline, but I'm kind of dedicating myself to the next couple of weeks, just having a pretty open communication with all the people who have bought this thing, and like really integrating their feedback, and then just going through. I've got like a bunch of different button types in the mail right now that I'm going to build kind of a final prototype to test, make sure I got the buttons perfect, and just go through every little detail and make sure everything is like locked down to where it's user friendly, and like those 50 people are just going to not be able to not go online and make a video and be like share their experience. I think really what can happen with this is you know, people get their units and it's just like a revolutionary tool for them, and then maybe a couple larger artists get the things and review them or whatever, and then it becomes more of a common thing, like the Behringer pedal or the Keith McMillan thing or whatever. You know, so right now I'm just like, I just want to make this thing as ideal as possible for as many people as possible. So that's my focus now, and that's where it's most natural for me. I'm not really a salesy guy, so you know, it's nice to be able to go back and be like, okay, now I can just really go back to design land and make sure everything's perfect.
It's really nice that this is born out of like some sort of need that you had, something that you felt needed in your own music. So it's got this like real world application to begin with. And it's especially cool that now you're getting all these other perspectives from other people that are doing, as we said before, Vir, you said it, like we all go down our own wormholes.
Yeah, totally.
And now you're able to like kind of put this thing at the bottom of many different wormholes and different ways of doing things. Um, uh, it's always a good sign when the developers are really listening to what their users are looking for and how they can make it work for them.
Yeah, and I mean it blows my mind, but so many out there are not, you know. So yeah, I think that's the foundation that I want to build things on. Like the config software I'm writing right now is going to be all web based. So one of the cool things I'm integrating into it is user macros. So basically, people will be able to submit little snippets of code that will, I don't know, do a set of 4 things in Ableton, and then you could just drag it onto a one of your buttons, and it'll be like, oh, sweet, like now I just got AfroDJMac's workflow for the thing, and it's you know, these like shareable little components. So I don't know, I'm just trying to really make it as community oriented as possible. I think that's like if my product can bring artists together to share their workflow and share and collaborate in some sense, then I think my goal is achieved, you know.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, there's so much software and so many devices. Like when you actually use them, you have to wonder if the developers ever tried to use it themselves.
Yeah.
You're just like, did anyone ever try to use this thing? Because it's just doesn't make any sense. And that's a nice thing that you're getting all those perspectives. But the ability to share the different workflows is great. And from what I see on the page, the software looks really intuitive, where you just kind of like pick the button and then you add on whatever kind of message you want to send. Just
Yeah,
just that's it. It should
pretty
just be
much.
that easy. And
Yeah,
does,
I mean, and it'll come with like a default set that I've kind of manicured to where it's like this workflow, this set of messages that are being sent, it works for me personally,
yeah.
and people can leave that or like load that back up if they, but you can also totally make it into a guitar pedal controller if you want, so yeah, there's
So
different ways
does
to work.
when you use the software, is this like generating some kind of like script that you would then load through the MIDI preferences in live, or is this?
Yeah, yeah, basically. So the way the thing works is there's states basically. So there's 12 buttons on the unit. Every time you press or hold a button, there's a sysx message that's sent out. So that sysx message will basically say like, hey, I'm a sysx message that is a button press on button 1 and it's on looper 1, and then every one of those messages then corresponds to some kind of function. So that function can be turn the metronome on or turn the looper 1 to record or whatever. So by having this kind of modular system where basically just the actions are tracked and then sent into the Ableton system, you can then link up your desired functionality to those like generic button actions. So that can also be like send a note on off message, send a program change message, send a CC or whatever, and you can just link it up to whatever a long press of 3 seconds needs to send out a note message of 127 or something, something, whatever you want it to do. So it's kind of just like a modular system that then the config software just generates a little script that says it has these sysx codes that are supposed to match up. It says, okay, when I see a button press on 1 on looper 1 or whatever, do this thing, and all you have to generate. The config software is super easy because all you have to do is generate a list of commands basically, and then the script will have those commands essentially.
That's cool, and that seems like it just. I mean, that's so important. I actually have a soft step too, and I do like it. It's cool, but I agree with you that it is a little tough to know when you're pressing a pedal. Especially in the heat of the moment. If you're playing live, but the configuration is like it's not very enjoyable. That part of it.
Yeah, I don't know why. Like, I mean, I don't know why it's so easy to make it limitless. I don't know why there's limitations placed on things, and like, I mean, why can't, with the soft step, why can't you say, hey, button 1 LED turn red when I send this control change? Like, there's so many more things that thing can do that just you can't access, and I just don't really understand why the developers would not take that into consideration. I don't know. I guess it's just a different demographic or something. But
Yeah, I mean, it's a super expressive pedal, but at the same
yeah,
time, like for me, my use, I guess, really, I don't trust myself to be able to be that careful with it with my foot, because it is a little tough you don't get a lot of feedback where like the traditional guitar pedal is that little click button and you feel it, you feel it. Even the Boss ones, they have that like click that happens,
yeah,
but it's not really there on the soft step.
yeah. I mean, it's amazing. It's an amazing piece of engineering. Like that
It is.
carbon fiber case is
Yeah,
awesome.
it's so thin and easy to deal with, and
Yeah,
it is very nice. I'm not trying to say I don't like it. I really do like it, but there are things about it too, and it kind of I guess those are the things that prevents me from using it even to its own full potential.
yeah. No, for sure. Yeah, and it's a different. I mean, compared to my thing, it's a very different
Yeah,
tool, very different workflow.
right.
But
Yeah, and this is obviously, is this I shouldn't assume that, but is this something that'll be exclusive to Ableton Live, or do you foresee it maybe other softwares or other
Uh,
applications even?
Initially, the first release is going to be exclusive to Ableton. I mean, it'll still work as a generic MIDI controller if you want to plug it in that like some other, like it'll still send the message, note on or whatever you configure it to send. But if you want to have the like visual feedback and like control over clips and stuff, right now it's going to be specific to Ableton just because it's kind of a lot already and it's a pretty complicated thing to write all that scripting. If this thing keeps like, if the first 50 people are really stoked and I keep on like developing the product, then there'll definitely be updates for Bitwig probably first because they've got a similar system, and then eventually I'd like to write a VST plugin that is just like a all around looper situation that works with this. My end goal was to have a little device that just plugs into the back of the DataLooper that gives you like a 4-channel, has like 4 Neutrik jacks basically, and then you could basically go in and configure your Ableton session with whatever your 4 loopers, and then the AD, the interface that plugs in the back of the DataLooper would basically work the same way as a standalone unit if you wanted to, or you could still run it through Ableton. But that's what I mean. It's the prototyping and engineering cost of doing something like that is just it's a whole another product development life cycle, and I just right now I want to make sure this one thing is great.
Yeah, I mean, I can only imagine. This is why I do digital downloads, for
Yeah,
because
no,
the
for sure.
complexity of this stuff is I admire your commitment to it because I know I'm sure you've been doing this for years. I think I saw like started in 2016, but you've got all these different prototypes. It's a cool picture you have of the evolution of DataLooper starting out with like
Thanks. It's
wooden jack.
fun. Just like you get a kick out of making your sample packs. It's like,
Yeah.
I get a kick out of doing that, like getting into the programming stuff and then like bringing it to a stage or bringing it to a live environment and like, oh, I can do these cool things that no one else can do except program them, like,
Yeah.
and then now sharing it with the world is a whole nother, it's a whole nother thing,
Yeah, I'm sure it's gonna change things up for a lot of people. And the
Yeah,
art is
I hope
really
so.
cool too, man. I love the art, the like kind of astronaut guy floating around. Um,
And it's a guitar pedal in the end,
and
it's like,
that's it. Yeah, because like there are some guitar pedals that I think I like better just because they're fun to look at. you know,
oh yeah,
like
the like tradition of that's awesome.
yeah, it is right. Like, and there's it's kind of like a special thing. You don't see that in a lot of gear. Or this like kind of like fun design, artistic element to it that guitar pedals have kind of developed over the years. So I'm
Yeah,
happy,
some of
happy you incorporated that.
yeah, I mean, there's just like some really like earthquaker devices I think
Yes,
comes
yeah,
to mind.
I'm thinking of them.
Those
Yeah,
guys, I don't know, they have this like art nouveau meets film noir, like like they've got an art theme with their thing, and it's just
yeah,
like, I love that, it's so cool. So yeah, I could take a little bit of that, then definitely.
yeah. I know it sounds weird, but I do think there's something that just makes it a little bit more fun to play with. And
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
you know,
totally.
I
You have to
I
look
put
at it cool thing.
I put wood sides on some of my synthesizers, and it's like I like it more.
Yeah,
I feel like it
sounds
sounds
better.
yeah, exactly.
Woodier.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, I want to be respectful of your time and your jam. I know you guys are having fun, and now you're in the second stage of the jam where you're going to start experimenting um, with the pedal and seeing what you can do with it. Um, I know this. It's you have a good website. It's a DataLooper. Is it
DataLooperPedal.com.
DataLooper pedal? Right. Okay, and that takes you right to the Indiegogo.
Yeah, that's probably the most thorough like source of information right now, because it's just got like all the videos and all the explanations and things.
Yeah. Nice. And we're going to have a little release as well, as probably to coincide with the launch of this episode, which is cool. So there'll be information about that in the show notes, a little Ableton Live download. But you got to check it out, everybody. it's really exciting to see, this hardware integration. And if you are a live looping person, especially someone with your hands full, this is a really interesting and unique labor of love. And now it's becoming a reality because we've hit the
Hit the
goal,
mark.
fundraising goal.
Yeah. Now it's just like, all right, get them made the best I can make them.
Yeah. Well, I'm pretty confident you will. Just talking to you, and your enthusiasm is definitely evident right from the moment I met you at Loop, and the idea is great, and I love that you are interacting with the backers, especially. That I think is that's one of the special things you get with a more like indie developer compared to like the giant corporation type of deal. And
Yeah,
it seems
sure.
like you're really leveraging that type of advantage.
I mean, if I talk to all of them and give them all what they want, they're just going to be that much more stoked,
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
that's the goal in the end.
Cool. Well, anything else before we go? Anything you guys want to shout out or say?
Keep making cool samples.
Keep exploring. Push those knobs. Make new sounds.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Vir, we'll definitely put a link to your music too. You said it's House of Panza. Am I saying it right?
House of Hamsa.
Yeah.
Hamsa. Okay. What's the spelling on that? The last part.
HAMSA.
HAMSA. Yeah, I'm excited to check out your stuff. I mean, you busted out a few like exotic instruments, and your whole philosophy is very fascinating to me. So I'm betting that there's some cool stuff coming out of your work. And even when we first tuned in on this call before we started recording, there was some like really interesting music going on in the background that I was just picking up through the phone. But I was like, whoa, what's going on in this room?
Yeah, if you Google, go on YouTube, House of Hamsa, you'll see all sorts of cool videos with all the live looping and ethnic instruments and kind of stuff we were talking about in action.
Excellent. We will do that. We will send people there. And Vince, you've got Mannequins by Day. Is this?
Yeah, that's my primary creative project right now. There's an album that's on Spotify that was mostly my own solo doing, and since then the band has expanded to where we are able to perform that stuff live, and then also have written a bunch of songs, and so it sounds probably a little bit more like a live band now. And the next set of recordings will echo that. But yeah, album, definitely check it out. Put the link in the thing.
Yeah, the videos you have on the site. It looks like you guys are playing in like some kind of brewery.
Yeah, one of the videos is a distillery,
Uh-huh.
a whiskey distillery.
Nice.
And then one of them is the studio that I work at, and yeah, I think there's a couple live things on there and whatnot.
Yeah.
But
the music was great. I really enjoyed it, and awesome
thanks.
guitar playing.
Thank you.
As
Appreciate
one guitarist to another, I like the little bit of finger picking you're doing in there on the
it.
electric.
Yeah,
Really cool.
yeah, totally. Appreciate it.
I mean, that's another nice thing Vince is offering out to the world, everybody. So you ought to check out.
No, thank you.
You ought to check out Mannequins by Day, and that'll be in the show notes too.
Cool. Thanks, man.
All right, you guys. I really appreciate you taking the time. Vince, thanks a lot for all you're doing. Vir, thank you for being a surprise guest. I'm happy to have a chance to talk to you and get some of your philosophy and wisdom about making music. It's inspiring, and I think you're absolutely right that there's a lot of potential out there that we still have to explore.
Yeah, most definitely.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, my pleasure. Absolutely.
Nice to talk to you, Ryan.
All right, everybody. Thank you for listening. Again, check out DataLooper. Check out House of Hamsa. Hamsa, am I saying that right? Hamsa?
So yeah,
Hamsa?
and my name is Vir, Vir McCoy, MCCOY.
Cool. All right. Well, check out the show notes, everybody. Good stuff. Have a great day.
You
Thanks,
too.
man.